Guys, I can't stop watching Regular Show. It's really good. I started watching it on Hulu a few weeks back, and now I have thoughts, so I'm gonna share those thoughts with you guys. Yeah. I think part of the reason why the show's connecting with me extra well right now is considering how it's about young adults going about their lives in their early 20s. So happens to be the stage of life I'm in right now, which means I'm basically gonna live forever. Regular Show somehow manages to put a lot of adult content matter into the context of the show, effectively making it a cartoon about two guys in their 20s for kids in their 10s. Mordecai and Rigby start their days doing the most basic thing, and somehow by the end of the show they're either fighting a big monster on the moon or having massive karate fights with martial arts they learned from a scrap of paper. So that every day. This is what I personally call the Regular Show climax of absolute madness. Similar to a Lovecraftian climax, but replacing existential crises and mental meltdowns with absurd cartoony fun, pushing the limits of reality with the most ridiculous series of events, and somehow it doesn't break the show. This is what I want to explore today, as well as appreciating one of my favorite cartoons in the process. So, why Regular Show is the king of storytelling? That's the title. We're gonna put it here. So, J.G. Quintel created a cartoon that's probably the best example I've seen of story structure, grounding their cartoony stories with a level of control that creates such an interesting experience, keeping you on the edge of your seat, waiting to see what happens next. Through the lens of a cartoon, and it's interesting to think of Regular Show as anything less than a cartoon, yet it strangely blends its cartoonish settings with a 90s style light sitcom. A sitcom in which the cast is made up of Mordecai and Rigby, two slackers that are happy to engage with anything wacky that comes their way, using their deep senses of imagination to work any type of solution. They're the main engine of the heart for the show as a whole, as what goofy situations where Mordecai and Rigby get into this week in the park makes up the basic idea for most of the episode's plots. The park, which is where the show takes place, is a location with a big house that makes up the playground for the kids, where the cast spends most of their time working. The setup calls back to classic sitcom settings like the bars in Cheers or the study group in Community. Like those old shows, Mordecai and Rigby run into a cast made up of people from all walks of life. People like Benson, a 30 to 4-year-old something that works a steady management job. He's actually pretty cool once you get to know him, but has a bit of a temper. While the cartoony context is there for a wacky character, you still have the added layer of human sensibility when you look deeper. At its core, Benson is a person that really cares, who's been broken slightly from having to be that one guy trying his hardest where he is, but keeps getting seen as lesser, even though thanks to him, the park stands, literally through the worst of the worst, and yet, at his most obvious, he just looks like a gumball machine. Muscleman is another example. At its most obvious, he's a green short version of Wario who screams the same joke over and over again. But when you look at deeper, he's a loyal, caring friend who will fight for the things that he cares about to the death. He's as confident and respectful as he is disgusting and gross. Somehow a role model and cartoony big brother, a gross man thing, and his joke about his mom when pulled back points to Muscleman's ideals of family and people you're loyal to. While I don't want to spend all day describing the show in retrospective ways, today I just want to talk about the backbone of the show, its strict attention to story structure. Sometimes this structure is so striking you see it poking through as the episode plays out, but never in a bad way. The show follows a simple 5-act story structure setup, that being exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolve, and it follows it very strictly. At its best, it takes you through a great story that balances quirky cartoony concepts, personal narrative storytelling, great framing devices, and metaphors that wouldn't look out of place in a sitcom about real people. One episode you'll be fighting birds in a nonsensical plot, the next you'll watch Mordecai dealing with depression over the girl he's been messing up with for almost the whole show. It somehow manages to tie everything in with a nonsensical cartoony tone. The key to this masterful balance is how the plot of the show strictly follows the 5-act format. The story structure that grounds the absurd story beats with some sense of order, creating a cartoon where literally anything can happen while still making perfect sense to its audience, and somehow still adds an added layer of personal narrative with its central characters. This is all thanks to the use of story structure. They use it to easily balance the chaotic ideas with orderly storytelling. For example, in an episode, Muscle Man's dad dies, and somehow the episode uses story structure to turn it into an analysis of Muscle Man's character growth, sharing his parental bond with Mordecai and Rigby, deepening their friendship in the process. It's a friendship that's reflected later in the episode. And the episode never feels heavy or out of place because it balances all these elements with the 5-act structure, every element of the story making up the acts themselves. Let me show you this structure step by step with another example. There's an episode where Benson, Mordecai, and Rigby are tied together to Benson while they control him. Meanwhile, they examine their relationships and get Benson to be more trusting of Mordecai and Rigby, by the end teaching kids the importance of trust. The overall story structure starts with exposition. In this point of the story, you're setting everything up for the following stages. This is done by establishing information and the ideas that the episode will go over, then try to explore. In our example, this episode starts by showing Pops. Pops is shown as examples throughout the day of Benson not being able to trust Mordecai and Rigby, and so the important information, the rules the episodes are established. In order for Benson to stop yelling and be more trusting of them, he's gonna have to learn how to trust them in some type of way. From the exposition stage, we move on to the rising action stage, and in which Pops decides to take them to the forest, tie Benson's eyes with a blindfold, and makes Mordecai and Rigby lead him out. That way establishing more trust between them. Then the climax kind of gets out of hand with like spirit monsters chasing them through the forest and Benson being blinded, and then they have to literally attach themselves together because I think they broke their legs and Benson got blinded and Rigby couldn't use anything other than his hands and couldn't even say anything, so they had to rely on Mordecai to take him throughout the whole experience. This then follows the falling action in which they learn to trust each other over the course of the episode and then resolve where Pops takes them to the hospital. The show isn't all cartoony fun though, but further grounds itself in the personal narrative of the show. The show just doesn't show the lives of people in their 20s, but also acts as a cartoon to try its best to convey concepts the show wishes to teach kids, and idealizing good morals and ideas as a result, passing them and equipping kids with them for later in life. They do that by making cartoony plots out of more adult subject matter, which were experiences the audience, kids that watch cartoons at the time, wouldn't find relevant till they reach young adulthood. In one episode, Mordecai and Rigby learned the importance of overcoming procrastination with coffee addiction, and that's something that I could relate to, something I had to learn the importance of when I got my first job, to keep my energy up and to carry me throughout work and classes. It's an episode that, at its most basic, teaches you the importance of hard work, and somehow still finds the time to make a giant coffee bean monster that gives the guys coffees with his body parts. Using story structure, they blend young adult humor with cartoony bizarre fun and make it work without breaking a sweat. In another episode, Mordecai gets out of the friend zone by talking about the importance of being bold and brave and seizing opportunities to a meteor. The show itself is transforming cartoony concepts into a sitcom style like adult cartoon, with Mordecai and Rigby engaging in wacky antics to avoid getting fired and becoming homeless. Simultaneously, it balances character relationships and adult situations, teaching kids valuable lessons about honor, bravery, hard work, and authenticity. By achieving this perfectly struck story structure, they can demonstrate the limits of storytelling by following timeless fundamental rules, building cartoony ideas from the ground up with core narrative foundations. To try and close out the video, I want to go over my personal favorite episode. The one where Mordecai and Rigby want a new video game, and so they try to get the money as street performance, making up songs for the people of the park. This episode somehow becomes almost like a microcosm for the overall show, in which they have to entertain people to earn money for their game with their passion alone. Then they're challenged in the rising action stage by a guy that's just sober and remaking everything they're doing insane and getting paid for their talent. This illustrates the show itself in the most basic way. It's just seeing what wacky situations Mordecai and Rigby get into. And so while they're standing in for the show itself, the sober guy, the dude that's just copying and soullessly remaking their words, is reselling it back to the people using a boombox. While this could be an argument for the soul of the show itself, as Mordecai and Rigby's wacky antics makes up the main engine or heartbeat for the greater story structure of the show, they beat the sober guy with a greater and more artful performance that's true to themselves. Simplicity will always beat soulless imitation. Maybe a greater message for the show itself in the ways that its limitless creativity is balanced with core story structure. When understood, it could be a little boring when you follow it, especially the on-the-nose version regular uses, almost getting to Phineas and Ferb level of repetition. But like Phineas and Ferb, who also follow a more repetitive format, but still elevates the story beats into something greater than the events that repeat themselves. Regular Show can also be repetitive, but elevates that regular repetition into something fun to follow thanks to its beating heart of storytelling. That heartbeat makes simple repetitions, those heartbeats of the story structure, so fun and engaging to follow. And that's why Regular Show is the king of story structure. Because by understanding clear-cut story structure, it creates a heartbeat of events that carry personal narrative, teach valuable lessons, and somehow do it all by balancing all that cartoony absurd goodness a kid or a young adult could ask for. Regular Show masterfully balances cartoony climaxes and adult situations without even trying. And maybe that's the best definition of cool I can think about. But hey, those are just my thoughts, and that's the video. Hopefully you guys like it, like and subscribe, and we'll keep grinding. Thank you.